Welcome to the Davis Joint Unified School District Area 2 Candidate Forum. I am Lynn DeLapp, co-coordinator of the candidate forums for the Davis Area League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a national, nonpartisan, volunteer organization founded in 1920 to educate and empower voters to exercise their rights in a democracy. The League encourages informed and active participation in government and works to increase voter understanding of public policy issues. A Davis chapter of the League was first established in Davis in 1957, and today, with over 100 members, is active in numerous civic activities, including nonpartisan candidate forums, voter registration and voter services, healthcare policy, and education about the city's general plan. Next year, our Davis and Woodland chapters will unite to create the League of Women Voters of Yolo County. If you are not already a member, I hope you will consider joining us. You can sign up at the registration table outside the doors. We wish to acknowledge the land on which we gather. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of the Patwin people, and the Patwin people have remained committed to its stewardship and protection. We are honored and grateful to be here tonight on their traditional homeland. The following are the standard rules applied to all League candidate forums with a live in-person audience, and we will follow them at this forum as well. For the best experience of community, civility, and the democratic process, our League asks that everyone remain attentive, respectful, and considerate of both our candidates and our neighbors. We are grateful for the participation of tonight's candidates, Leah and Lizzie, and the opportunity to have a live community member audience. Thank you also to those watching at home. And we hope, since there are not too many people here, there are lots of you watching at home. Tonight's event is not a forum for public comment, but an opportunity to hear directly from the candidates. Opportunities for public comment are available at scheduled school board meetings. This event is being recorded and live streamed. We ask audience members to turn off cell phones and refrain from video recordings. All are welcome to view this forum in full at any time following the forum by visiting our League website. Also, we ask audience members to refrain from commenting, applauding, or demonstrating support or disapproval of candidate responses so that all questions and answers can be clearly heard in the room and online. Attendees causing disruption may be asked to leave. Tonight, in partnership with Davis Media Access, we are hosting a discussion of key Davis school issues with the candidates for the Area 2 trustee for Davis Joint Unified School District. It's the little green spot on the map there. That's Area 2. That's where those who will live in that area will be voting for the candidates in Area 2. As you know, the Board of Trustees, or School Board, is the governing board for the Davis Unified School District and responsible for establishing and funding educational programs and structures, ensuring accountability for the education of our children, and providing community leadership as advocates for children, the school district, and public schools. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Michelle Famula, our League chapter president, who will walk us through tonight's agenda and explain our forum process.
Thank you, Lynn. Good evening. My name is Michelle Famula. I will serve as moderator for this evening's forum. I'm joined by Nikki Neff, my fellow League member and tonight's timekeeper. This evening, our Davis Joint Unified School District Candidate Forum is pleased to welcome incumbent Leah Dara and challenger Elizabeth Lizzie Griffith, seeking to represent Trustee Area 2. Here is our forum process. Each candidate will give a 90-second opening statement, and after opening statements, candidates will respond to 5 moderated questions. These questions were selected by members of the Davis League of Women Voters, and 2 of these questions were sent to the candidates prior to the forum. Both candidates will have an opportunity to respond to each question, and each candidate will have a rotated opportunity to be the first respondent. After moderated questions, we will move directly to audience questions, with each candidate again having an opportunity at first response. We will end with closing statements, in which each candidate will give a 1-minute closing statement. The speaker order for both opening and closing statements was determined by a random drawing held just before the start of our forum. Flip of the coin. By random process, we have identified that Lizzie Griffith will start us off with her 90-second opening statement. 90 minutes, oh my goodness. 90-second opening statement, followed by Leah Dara. Following opening statements, our 5 moderated questions will begin with candidates having rotating opportunities. Each candidate has 90 seconds for their response. Candidates will be shown a 15-second warning yellow card by our forum timekeeper and a red card when their time has ended. After primary responses from both candidates, I will ask if either candidate wants to add a 30-second follow-up response. Candidates will be recognized in the order of their raised hand. Responses will be limited to a single follow-up response per question per candidate. Candidates will again be reminded by our timekeeper of their time limit. Following our 5 moderated questions, we will move directly to audience questions. Candidates will each have an opportunity to give a 1-minute response to each audience question, rotating the opportunity for first response. After primary responses, each candidate may add a 30-second follow-up response. Following audience questions, we'll move to the candidate's 1-minute closing statement. Using our random process, we have identified that Lizzie will give the first closing statement, followed by Leah. Here are the rules for our live audience Q&A. In addition to the ground rules previously provided by our forum chair, I wish to let you know that there will be no intermission, so that audience members are encouraged to take breaks as needed. There will be no verbal audience questions or statements. All audience questions must be submitted in writing. Audience members have been given 3x5 cards to submit their questions during the first half of the forum, and some questions have been submitted in advance online. Submit 1 question per card, and please keep questions brief, positive, and related to the office of School Board Trustee and applicable to all candidates. Please remain seated and pass cards to the center throughout the forum. They will be collected by our league volunteers. At about 6:25, I'll ask everyone to pass any remaining written questions to the center aisle for collection. Questions will be screened to combine similar questions and make sure to include a range of topics and eliminate any inappropriate questions. Finally, once again, we ask our in-person audience to refrain from any show of support or opposition to candidate comments. We also ask you to hold your applause as the candidates give their opening statement. And at the end of the forum, I will ask you all to join me with applause to acknowledge all candidates and thank them for their service. Let's get started. We begin with each candidate's 90-second opening statement, and we will hear first from Lizzie.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Lizzie Griffith, and I'm a mom to 2 kids who will be moving through Davis Unified as soon as they're age eligible. One of them's here tonight. Hi, Veronica. And with that, I want to say thank you also to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event, and thank you, Leah, for being here. Transparency is one of the key pillars of why I'm running. And so as part of that, I believe that nobody should run unopposed. It's great to have opportunities like this when there is a challenger to have a public discourse in a forum and hear what our values and our priorities are. So really welcome the opportunity. Professionally, I oversee a large research team at the California Department of Social Services. We do research evaluations, pilot programs, and special projects. And in that role, I use evidence-based, data-driven public policy on a regular basis to make decisions that impact the lives of millions of Californians. That's the expertise I would bring to this role. I have a doctorate in cultural anthropology from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and with that, I gained classroom experience through 7 years of teaching. I'm running, again, to lift up transparency, accountability, equity, and inclusion. I want to expand early childhood education offerings in the district, as well as promoting safety and well-being in that role. I believe that I bring to this a strategic and intentional form of leadership, something that I think I promote daily in my work life and that I could bring to this role, again, to lift up transparency in our decision-making process, ensuring that all the data that we use is widely, readily, publicly available when we make decisions, and it's also informed by community involvement. I believe that the answers to the rest of my questions this evening will show you what I mean by that leadership vision. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. And Leah?
Thank you to League for putting on this event this evening. My name is Leah Dara. I'm the current trustee for Area 2. As my kids, Brooke, Tyler, and Ryan, attended Davis schools, I volunteered in classrooms and PTAs and served on a variety of district committees and site councils. So I've had the chance to see this district from many angles. Professionally, I've done statewide work in education policy, early ed, childcare, licensing, and legislation and collaboration work with other organizations such as the California Teachers Association and members of the Ed Coalition. Thanks to this background, I was able to jump into the role of a trustee in a very difficult time in 2020. Well, the board, these past 4 years, I've had the great joy of working to advance equity and see meaningful engagement of our students in ethnic studies, support new facilities across the district, and I'm excited to see construction underway of TK sites across the district. I've worked with my fellow trustees to navigate complex budgets and competing interests, but always keeping students foremost in our minds. I'm firmly committed to being an ally to our LGBTQ+ students and staff and ensuring our district and our school is a safe place for them to learn and work. I've taken advantage of all the training courses and learning opportunities offered to me, but I've learned a lot on the job. I've found joy in this work, talking with students, observing classrooms, doing listening tours, and soaking in the excitement of the homecoming parade. I'm honored to be endorsed by the Teachers Association, the school board, and the city council, and I have experience, background, and commitment to serve another 4 years on the Davis School Board. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We will now move to our 5 moderated questions where each candidate will have a 90-second opportunity to respond. Alternating first opportunities, we will begin the first question with Leah. Leah, question number 1. What is your top priority for change in our schools? How would you implement it?
During my 4 years, we've had a lot of exciting changes here in the district. So we've seen a lot of investments in our students, and from the earliest learners to the high school. So the change I'd like to see now is an improvement in our attendance. Our schools are funded on average daily attendance, and pre-pandemic, we were at 96 to 97% attendance. Currently, we're between 93 and 94%. Each percentage is worth $1 million. So the money we could recoup in investing in our students, our staff, and our programs. We're working on messaging here with the district to inform parents of the importance of attendance. And in fact, September is Attendance Awareness Month. And research shows that missing 10% of school, or about 18 days of most school years, negatively affects student outcomes. So it's really important, and it is a way for us to recoup money for the district that our students will benefit from.
Thank you. Lizzie, 90 seconds.
Sure. So my top priorities, again, I alluded to this earlier. Number 1 is going to be transparency and accountability. I'm a digital native, and at this point in time in 2024, there's no reason why all the information that we want about the school board, the decisions that are being made, when they're being made, why they're being made, how they're being made, should not be readily available online. From where I see it right now, and I've heard this over and over and over again in the community, that information is typically available technically in compliance with Brown Act regulations, but it is hard to find. It takes a lot of investment to get to those answers. And so I would change that on day 1 and make sure that that's readily available, which goes to my second point, which is making everything data-driven and evidence-based. So we want that data and that evidence to be quickly and readily available online. So the points that Leah just brought up are great ones, right? Knowing the cost of students not attending is critical information. That should be out there. It should be available like that to all of us. And so that's something I would want to lift up. We can make informed decisions when we have that information at our fingertips. Another top priority there is going to be early childhood education. So the district is already taking some steps to building this out, but there's more that could be done. There is more demand in the community, and I think that we could work to address that demand. It would work also to increase declining enrollment, which is a concern in the community as well. We know through research that when families are engaged early on and find that the public schools are meeting their needs at preschool and going into TK and kinder, that they are likely to stay with the district for the remaining years. But right now, we see that it's often not meeting the needs of families, and they are opting out and going elsewhere. So that's something else I would want to lift up as a top priority. Thank you.
You each have an opportunity for a 30-second follow-up, and would you like to do that, Leah?
Yeah, thank you. At the point on transparency, I agree. We can always be more accessible and transparent to our communities. I'd encourage all of our community members to look at our school board agendas. They're online. But sometimes coming to those conclusions can be a little hard to know because people are busy. So I hear that point. But regarding attendance data, the information on attendance is actually on the district website. If you type in attendance, all the information and data I shared with you is on the website, readily available to you. And we'd love to invest more in early ed, but limiting funds are the issue.
30-second follow-up opportunity if you wish.
Sure. I think that actually mostly made my point. It is difficult to dig that information out. It's on there. You can find it. You have to dig. You have to know to go where to look. Google often doesn't take you there, and so we could do a lot more to better index that, use better SEO opportunities, that's search engine optimization, to really lift that up and make it more widely available. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity for folks that have that kind of experience to step in and bring those resources and make it part of the everyday practice.
Thank you both. Moving on to question 2. Evaluate the current and long-term financial health of the Davis Joint Unified School District. What are your budget priorities? With 90 seconds, that will go first to Lizzie.
Sure. So right now, we are overwhelmingly dependent on state funding, which, as most of us know, is extremely volatile. The state of California has to balance its budget, which means we tend to have these large fluctuations from year to year in the general fund dollars that are available. So that impacts the school district budget. We also rely very heavily on parcel taxes and one-time fundings, and I am grateful, as I hope all of you are, that we have the kind of community support that enables us to do that. Unfortunately, it becomes a situation where if the schools are not meeting the need of the community, then it is unlikely we would continue to receive that one-time support. And increasingly, I am hearing in the community that the schools are not necessarily meeting that need. So that's something we need to step back and address and do some research to see where those gaps are. So I'd point out to that. Ultimately, my priority there would be to get to a place where we are exceeding the minimum reserve for economic uncertainties so that we can help smooth out these uncertainties in the future, and I recognize that's going to be a challenge. I have heard a lot about campus closures as a potential avenue for how we could solve budget deficits, and I want to say that I believe that's a red herring that is steering us away from solutions that could actually enact change. Both the PPIC and the Brookings Institute have pointed to the fact that campus closures do not have the returns that they hope to see in closing budget deficits, and worse, when they are enacted, campus closures have serious equity impacts on the community.
Thank you. Again, question 2, evaluate the current and long-term financial health of the Joint Unified School District. What are your budget priorities? Please, Leah.
Thank you. If I was the doctor evaluating our budget, I would say you're okay, but you could be better. As my opponent said, we rely on state funding and that fluctuates. But we have maintained the state required 3% reserve, and even during difficult times, we've managed that as a district, making sure that we give as much as we can to our teachers in pay and benefits, as well as investing in programming. We'll see a decline in state funding this coming year, but things look better in the out years in 25-26 and 26-27. At this time, things look like they'll improve. My budget priorities are to provide a high-quality, well-rounded education for each of our students, ensuring those furthest from opportunity get their needs met, and that is in multiple ways, not just in the classroom, but in their meals and services. I also would say one of my priorities is compensation for our employees in both salary and benefits to the best of our ability. And we know that that's difficult competing with districts around us. And I value maintaining fiscal solvency and transparency. I worked very hard to pass Measure N, along with many volunteers here in the community, to secure ongoing funding as a parcel tax, but that is not enough to solve all the budget problems the state of California gives us. So I will continue to advocate for that at a statewide level, but here in the district, I will work hard to ensure our dollars go to the students that need it.
Again, there's an opportunity for a 30-second follow-up response if either of you would choose to do that.
Sure, I'll take that because I'm really glad that you raised the issue of staff compensation. I think that's pretty critical, and that's actually part of why I want to make sure that we're able to get to a place where we're exceeding that minimum reserve, because that would help us ensure that we can continue to, or really we need to improve on this, to help meet wages and keep the staff and the faculty in a position where they feel comfortable and supported in their environment in times of economic uncertainty. So it's exactly in those moments when the state general fund might be looking at cuts that I think we need to make sure that the folks working in our schools supporting our students every day are feeling supported with their compensation packages. So thanks.
Opportunity for a follow-up, Leah?
Thank you. While I would love to see us maintain a higher than 3% reserve, I also feel it's our obligation to our staff to give them as much as we could, and that's what brought us to lower than we adopted a 4% reserve, but looking at trying to stay competitive for our staff members, that brought us to a 3% reserve. So, in many cases, it would feel nice to have more money, but we really have to give the money to the people who are doing the work now, as opposed to holding on to it.
Thank you. Moving on to question 3. What are the most important things Davis Joint Unified School District can do to ensure student and employee safety? You each have 90 seconds. We begin with Leah.
It's a multi-pronged approach. The majority of our safety, all of our schools have a school safety site plan, and that's one way that we look at and tend to security and safety on our campuses. But on the larger scale of all the things that happen in our world, sometimes there are some pretty troubling things that we think as possible outcomes at schools. And so really helping our community stay well connected, getting mental health resources, and providing people with avenues for help if they need help will be the best way to ward off some of the bigger events. But in the day-to-day safety, we need to be also, all of us taking responsibility for student safety. Pick up and drop off are some of the most dangerous times of the day. That's in our hands. And in terms of attacks on our district and attacks on our students, we need to stand together upholding state law, federal law, and ed code to protect those under attack and making sure our schools are safe for everyone. So that's vitally important, and I think it's all of our job with the school district as well as our community.
Thank you. Again, question number 3, what are the most important things Davis Joint Unified School District can do to ensure student and employee safety? Lizzie.
Yeah, so some excellent points brought up. I think we need to parse this out a little bit and think about where the concerns are with safety and how to address them turn by turn. So I can start with some of the psychological safety factors at play. I think we could do a lot more work to ensure that there's trauma-informed practices and teaching being implemented across the board universally, not just with teachers, but also with staff and anybody who might be interacting with students on a regular basis. ACEs Aware is a great resource that we could turn to and lift up and prioritize. So ACEs being adverse childhood experiences, want to ensure that that gets lifted up and brought into the fold in a strategic manner. That's best practices from a data-driven perspective. In terms of physical safety, there's a lot of work that this district could do. When we look at checklists that evidence-based organizations put forward, the School Safety Advocacy Council, for example, we are not yet meeting most of the items that we see on those checklists. There's a lot of work we could do there to make improvements with regard to physical safety. And some of that, yes, does fall to parents and other community members, but some of that's going to fall to infrastructural design choices that we need to make. I'm glad to see that strategic fencing has been considered, but I think that there's a lot of room for improvement in the transparency around that decision-making process. More on that.
Opportunity for a 30-second follow-up. Yes, Leah.
Thank you. I think that we have to be mindful that any changes we make to our school district have to be in agreement or bargain with our bargaining units. So while we could have some designs as board members and things that we might want to see, it is a really nuanced process to make changes. And so we need to think about the most likely negative outcome for students, and that's like students running from campus. They call it elopement. Sounds more romantic than it is. And that's the kind of thing that student safety that we need to be mindful of, and that's how our strategic fencing has been chosen to deal with issues like that. So those are the most common things that affect our students, and then student safety in terms of well-being, we are on that.
Thank you. Opportunity for a 30-second follow-up?
Sure. I'm glad to hear that elopement is coming up as the top concern, because that is, from an evidence-based perspective, the best case for why we should put fencing around our schools is for to support universal design, to bring students in. Part of implementing that is to ensure safety for all students. That problem, student elopement, was not clearly articulated as the primary problem that is hoping to be solved with fences, and that's exactly the kind of transparency that I'd like to bring.
Thank you. As it is now 6:25, I'm going to remind the audience that all written questions need to be submitted in time for us to make the timeline we have for tonight's presentation. So please, would all audience members who have written comments send them to the center aisle so they can be collected. I'm going to move on to question number 4. What are the impacts of declining enrollment in Davis schools, and what is the best approach for managing enrollment? Again, with 90 seconds, we begin first with Lizzie.
Yeah, so declining enrollment is a problem not just in Davis, but it's all over the state, and indeed it's in many parts of the country. And so this is something that there is, lots of research on. So part of this is that there's demographic factors driving declining enrollment. There's simply fewer young people, and that's something that we obviously need to solve for, but that we can't structurally change that necessarily. But we still need to attend to the effects of it. Something that we have a lot more control over is whether or not our schools are meeting community needs. And this is something that we don't have sufficient evidence for in the school district, but we do have evidence for it at a statewide level. So families opting out of their local public education systems is rising. Folks are choosing private schools, homeschooling, other avenues for getting education for their children, or not educating their children, which is a problem. But by and large, we see that failure to meet community needs is a widespread problem. Whether or not that's happening in Davis, we don't know. We don't have the data, and that's something that I think we really need to dig into, because families choosing not to come to our Davis schools is a real structural problem. And that's a problem at a level of if they're not enrolling, and it's a problem on a daily basis if they're not attending. And so I'd really love to dig in and get more information about why exactly we're seeing declining enrollment.
Thank you. Again, question 4, what are the impacts of declining enrollment in Davis schools, and what is the best approach for managing enrollment? Leah.
Thank you. Well, you've asked a really tough question. If I could answer it for you entirely in 90 seconds, maybe it wouldn't need a school board, but it's definitely a concern. Declining enrollment impacts us, and the weird thing about declining enrollment is it doesn't happen in one site. We can't just lose a grade level or a site of schools. It's some third graders here, second graders here, high school students here, and that makes it very hard when we make our curriculum planning, our teacher planning, and our site planning. So one of the things that we came up to last spring was some declining enrollment over in the Putwin attendance area, and so it needed a quick fix, and we were able to put a TK first, a kinder first, TK kinder cohort over there to help boost that up. So it's going to take a multi-pronged approach from the community to really look at our assets, look at where the students are, and ensure that students have access to local schools in their neighborhood. And then we have to decide what the investment is we're willing to make and what size schools we're willing to maintain. And I think we will have to look at boundaries, which we are committed to as a district doing, looking at boundaries and deciding whether that could be some of the fix. But the overall declining enrollment is a concern, and we do know that more children are born in Yolo County than end up coming to Davis schools. So there is a change there, and we are doing some demographic study on that. Last research we had for the district was in March, and we're continuing to get more data and figure out if this is a one-year blip or if it's an ongoing, more fast problem than we realized.
Again, an opportunity for a 30-second follow-up. Either?
Yeah, so that's some data I'd really love to see. And it seems sometimes like the district is talking out of both sides of their mouth. So, you know, there's concerns about declining enrollment, and at the same time, there's families that are being turned away because classroom sizes are impacted, and possibly even turned away in ways that violate state law. So that's something that needs to be clarified, and I think there is a lot of room for transparency and accountability in how that's happening and why it's happening. And I recognize that sometimes some classrooms are impacted and others are not, but that needs to be part of the clear public discourse around this, and not just something that's hidden if we dig through all the meeting agendas, maybe.
Opportunity? Yes.
No Davis student is turned away from attending a Davis school. There can be students from out of the district who wish to come here who may not be having a space for them. Currently, we have over 1,000 interdistrict transfers, most of which are connected to our staff members, and those students bring in $11 million in ADA funding. So they're welcome, and they are helping us to ensure we're addressing some of the declining enrollment issues here in town.
Thank you. Final question of the moderated questions. How should student progress be measured in the Davis schools? You each have 90 seconds, and we begin with Leah.
I think student progress in any student has been measured in multiple ways. Obviously, we have their annual test scores when they take statewide testing. We have their report cards and their teacher observations on them. But I think if we look at the whole of our students, look at them over the course of time as they're developing, we want to ensure that they're becoming happy and healthy, lifelong learners. And so helping to make sure they're engaged in school, that they feel safe, that they have access to all the basic necessities of food and safety in our schools, then we can help progress them towards their actualization of their long-term goals. And we want all of our students to come out of our schools 21st century learners, ready for college or career or both, and to know that there's multiple pathways to success. I think if we do those things, we help our students progress and measure. So I think one time measuring them is a little bit harder than to look at the big picture. And I know that's hard in the moment, but if we keep moving them forward and giving our students opportunities for remediation if they need it, or acceleration if they need it, and as we work at our UDL work, which is Universal Design for Learning to Remove Barriers, we're gonna help to ensure that students are met where they at, and are able to progress, no matter what their learning capacity is or their personal goals are.
Thank you. Again, our fifth question, how should student progress be measured in the Davis schools? Lizzie.
Yeah, this is an interesting question, and one that I think really brings some opportunities to think differently. So obviously, hard to disagree with everything that Leah is saying, and you know, we're not going to get around mandatory tests, right? And those are important metrics. But I think there's really an opportunity here to do some innovative and creative thinking, and possibly to utilize the resources that are in our community. So I, for one, would love to see a kind of human-centered design approach that really looks holistically at the whole student and the exit outcomes. As far as I could tell, that's the kind of thing that would be quite innovative across the country, but really taking a whole student approach to thinking about how they're doing, what their well-being is, are they engaged, and is their experience in our schools meeting the needs that they have personally as an individual level as they move into the future. There's folks at UCD who we could use to help design something like that and really think through it. And something like that could be an extremely cost-effective way to understand the progress of our students. And that kind of innovative thinking would put Davis schools back as being a national leader in education. We were at one time national leaders, and we are no longer holding on to that position. And it's that kind of innovative strategic leadership that I think could really help drive that forward.
Thank you. An opportunity for a 30-second follow-up. Yes, Leah.
Thank you. I appreciate the human-centered viewing of our students, and I agree that utilizing resources when available are wonderful. We have to also be very realistic as a board about what the capacity of our staff and what we can accomplish. And we need to right now focus on, especially in a down year financially, we need to really focus on ensuring the students that are in the schools now, their needs are met. And we have several initiatives that have been adopted by our strategic plan, and we need to stay focused on those. If we allow ourselves to move our head all the time, we will not accomplish the things that we've committed to. So I think it's a difficult balance.
Thank you. Opportunity?
I was on that whole time. It is a difficult balance. It's a line that I try to toe all the time in my professional field. We're balancing innovation with the work that we need to do immediately with trying to plan long range for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Grant opportunities are a tremendous resource to move this along. Working with academic resources, something that I do on a daily basis, is a great avenue to move this forward. I think it's worth pursuing. It could be a really underutilized opportunity. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both. That concludes our moderated league questions, and we're now going to move to audience questions. For these questions, each candidate may provide a 1-minute response and a single 30-second follow-up. First responses will be again rotated between the candidates. And finally, to ensure for candidate closing statements adequate time, audience questions will conclude at 6:50, and that probably gives us an opportunity for 4 or 5 audience questions. So the first question, and candidates, again, you each have 1 minute to respond. And we'll begin with Lizzie. The first question is with regard to early childhood education. What are your priorities for early childhood education in Davis, and what opportunities and challenges are you hoping to address or provide leadership on?
Sure. So there's some limited opportunities for preschool in the Davis public school system. There's 2 campuses right now that have childhood centers. I'd really like to see that expand. There is tremendous public demand for preschool in this community. The existing private preschools are impacted. There's long wait lists, and they are very expensive. And so expanding the opportunity for the blended format where there is fee-based alongside state-funded preschools, I think would be a tremendous advantage to this community. I think based on the understanding that I have with community members, there would be a great desire to have those offerings co-located in the schools where the children will eventually move on through elementary school. This is also something that could help address declining enrollment by smoothing out capacity on the campuses to change classrooms from one format to another where possible. Recognize there's an infrastructural cost associated with that. That would go along with expanding to all-day kinder, which is happening, and all-day TK, which has not yet happened.
Thank you. Leah, same question, early childhood education. What are your priorities for early childhood education in Davis, and what opportunities and challenges are you hoping to address or provide leadership?
Sure. Well, my priorities are, we're seeing it right now, the breaking ground for our TK facilities across the district, and more to roll in. And it's exciting, and it's definitely going to meet some needs in our community, and it's not the full need that our community has. But the problem that we have is facilities money to build. Children in early childhood education need classrooms that are built to a size by law and bathroom access that's different than a regular classroom. And we have to use the bond dollars that we have. When we projected this project originally, it was going to be $32 million. By the time we've come to start to put pencil to paper, it's $51 million. So we have to use that money that we have to our best of our ability. Is it a good investment? Absolutely. And I would say to a person, our board is committed to that, and it's very exciting work. But there are also physical capacities at each site in terms of how much childcare or TK sites where they can be placed.
Thank you. There is an opportunity for a 30-second response.
Yeah, so this is, again, just where I'd really like to see greater transparency around this information, because I think there's, as an involved community member and parent, it's confusing to me that we're facing declining enrollment and talk about campus closures, but then there's also not enough space to retrofit on those same campuses to make these facilities available. I don't doubt that that's true. I'm just confused, and I want to understand how we get from A to B in that. And so that's why I'd really want to lift up that piece about transparency, because I want to be able to follow how that's.
30-second response.
Thanks. The facts I just cited are in a board presentation. They're all attached to the board agenda, so they're available to the general public. But I think it's really important for folks to know is that we can't just change over existing classrooms to TK classrooms, because we do have several potential building projects here in the community. And if those were to happen, we'll actually need all the classrooms. So we have to find a way to braid TK and K through 12 K6 in that case, classrooms onto sites. So we have to work with what we have, our existing infrastructure, and Anytime we remodel or make any changes, it has to go through Department of State Architecture.
Okay. Our next audience question refers to individual education plans. We'll begin first with Leah. Individual education plan students need special time outside the classroom, yet need inclusive time as well. How will you support real inclusion and in individual education plans?
Sure. Well, I think it's really important that we acknowledge the needs of each learner, and when a student has an individual education plan or an IEP, then those are very specific, directed goals and steps and rights the student has. And sometimes that is served outside of the classroom, and sometimes it's served in the classroom. I'm very proud that our district is a full inclusion district, and of all the surrounding districts, we have the highest percentage of time that students in our special education program spend in our regular classrooms. Our commitment as a board is that all students are general education students first, and then their additional needs are addressed, so that as we build our schedules and as we make our resources available, we ensure that our students who have additional needs are having them met. In addition, we did a study from WestEd on our special education program, and that study showed us areas of improvement, and we're working on that. Our UDL work and our implicit bias work are initial steps in that direction.
Thank you. Lizzie, same question. IEP students needing special time outside the classroom, yet needing inclusive time in. How will you support real inclusion and individual education plans?
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to go second because there's not a lot to add. I think we really do, looking to universal design is so important. And there's a lot more work to still do in rolling that out and making sure that that's well understood and understood what the intentions are there, right? And I think implicit bias training and awareness can be part of what can help bridge the gap around that and build that in. And to some degree, there's also a need to look to our physical spaces as well, right? And I'm glad that we are starting to do that because that's part of full inclusion is we need to make sure that the campuses are accessible and inclusive spaces. So, for example, looking to the strategic fencing decisions that were made. And, again, I'm glad that it finally came up that elopement is a critical issue in that decision because that's a problem that fences can really work to solve, right? And working to reduce the opportunity there for elopement can make those places more inclusive. So I'd like to see that. And again, more training on awareness of what trauma-informed practices look like for those other communities as well would be very helpful.
Opportunity for a 30-second follow-up? No. Opportunity for a 30-second addition? All right, well, moving on. Audience question number 3. How can the Davis Joint Unified School District increase educator compensation when our district is underfunded compared with neighboring districts? I believe we begin first with Lizzie.
Sure. So that's a question that requires a long-range solution and strategic thinking. And, as Leah brought up, the longer-range outlook for the budget isn't so dire, right? It looks like we're going to be back in a pretty good space, not next fiscal year, but the following fiscal year. And from there on out, things should be improving. So that's a space where we can look to those projections and look to see where we can increase compensation down the line and continue to attract quality educators here. It's also a space I think we need to get creative about other opportunities for grant programs, for example, to build that out and bring in additional revenue that doesn't rely on community contributions to one-time funds. Typically, that could be something that pays off very quickly. So that could be something to look into as well. And of course, as was already mentioned, closing the gap on the attendance to get us back to where we were in the pre-COVID era is critical.
Thank you. Leah? Yes, absolutely. How can the Davis Joint Unified School District increase educator compensation when our district is underfunded compared with neighboring districts? Thank you.
You only give easy questions, huh? Well, I will say that I volunteered on the Measure G campaign to help with employee compensation. So that's one thing that we did as a district. But we're having to do patchwork over lower funding than neighboring districts. So it really is a very difficult quandary. So we need to ensure that our working conditions are as good as possible for our employees. And when we do have the money, instead of keeping it in reserves, we're going to need to hand it over to our employees because they're doing the work. And that includes our classified and our certificated employees. I think that's only fair. And at least we can tell our employees we are truly giving them as much as we can, as opposed to saying we are, but holding on to reserves. And it's difficult to not hold in reserves. Reserves would give the board much more comfort in our stomachs as we look at our budget. But we also face the folks of our community who come to the dais and tell us about their living conditions and the impacts of having less income, and we need to ensure that they are well compensated the best that we can.
Opportunity for a 30-second follow-up?
Yeah, I would just add to that, that thinking about a more holistic view on quality of life, right? So there's opportunities over the next few years to think about workforce housing, right? And I think there's great opportunities there to think about a holistic compensation package that could be really something a little bit more unique that could bring and retain quality staff in. So I think that's an opportunity that's going to be facing the board very soon, where we could look to a more holistic package and the things we can do there.
Opportunity, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up workforce housing. We actually adopted a resolution in support of workforce housing. We are going to join with other districts with the California School Board Association to pilot some ways in which we can address workforce housing. We know that this is a vital way to support our staff, and we do have a little bit of property, but as a district, we are not as well funded as the state and other entities. So we're going to need to find creative ways to work and to try and find solutions that will work for our employees and allow them to live in the community and work in the community. And I think it's going to take a community-wide effort, though, to support this, because this is not something the district can do alone. We do own a little bit of property, but our city and our voters need to really think about what it means to have the ability for people that teach and work here to live here.
Thank you. We'll move to our fourth audience question, which I believe in need for time is going to be our last one. Okay, let's go with this one. Starting with Leah, what are the biggest challenges facing yourself as a trustee in the next 4 years?
Wow, interesting. I think sometimes maybe it's time. It's time to be able to invest in all the things I want to. Every time I find out about another event we're having at one of the school sites or going to a classroom, it's a little bit of a challenge. And I'm trying to kind of get that focus. And I think for me personally, coming out of COVID, and I lost my son in 2022, and so there have been times for me coming around some of our school sites in the district that have been really painful as I revisit that, his childhood and growing up. So those are my challenges, but I'm trying to embrace the good memories and remember that the things my son struggled with are things our students could be struggling with now. And so if I am willing to open myself up and deal with that, I can help other people. So I try my very best, but it's difficult sometimes. Sorry there, I got a little emotional, sorry.
No, thank you for sharing that. And Lizzie, same question. What are the biggest challenges facing yourself as a trustee that you anticipate in the next 4 years?
I have to recognize that really vulnerable moment that you shared. That's powerful, and so thank you for being willing to share that with us. That must be hard. And now I'm expected to follow that. So, yeah, time. I have 2 young children, but there's a saying, if you have something to do, give it to a busy person. I find ways to prioritize. I find ways to get things done. I make it happen. My biggest challenge that would face me over the next 4 years, obviously, is that I don't have the experience coming in. So I would be on top of things, looking to the experience that I do have, to use that to leverage, to learn more about the specific duties of this role. I think I have a great wealth of experience to draw upon. So I'm up for the challenge, but I'll be very candid. That's going to be the thing that I need to do on day one. And again, just really.
Thank you. Thank you for responding, and thank you for sharing, and I appreciate it very much. I'm going to move on to closing statements, which I'm hoping will give everyone an opportunity to be more composed and have something that they have prepared. We'll start with Lizzie for the closing statement. You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so thanks again, everyone who's here. The room's filled in a bit, which is great to see. I started by saying that one of my top priorities is transparency and accountability, and that I believe that that's a key part of the democratic process, and being able to engage in conversation tonight is important. I'm glad we're able to air things. So, and that's the kind of transparency and accountability that I want to bring, not trying to dig things out. I would just want to have open conversations, right? And so we got to do this tonight, so I'm really appreciative of that. I would be lifting up data and evidence whenever possible to help us make decisions with community feedback. That's going to be a top priority for me. I think there's a lot of research that we could bring in, much of which is done right here in our own backyard at UCD, and we need to be able to leverage that. And so finally, and I believe that this encompasses all of it, you know, again, I have 2 young children. They're going to be in this school system for the next 2 decades. So it's really important for me to think strategically and long-term, you know, not just next budget cycle or the cycle after that, but what does a budget cycle look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? So that's the vision.
Thank you. And Leah, your closing statement.
Thank you. So over the past 4 years, I think I've proved myself to be a capable, compassionate, and committed trustee. I've enjoyed my collaboration with my colleagues, with teachers, staff members, administrative staff here in the district, and I've learned a lot. I thought I knew a lot when I came into the job, but boy, nothing teaches you and humbles you like kids. And I'm just doing the work day to day. And I found it to be incredibly rewarding, joyful, as I shared, sometimes difficult, but really it reminds me of the investment I've made in this community for 25 years. I watched my kids grow here. I drove carpools. I served on the PTA. I drove the soccer team all over Creation and bought Taco Bell for thousands, it feels like thousands of teenagers over the year to get them to their sports. And I did it with joy. I loved it. And I want to serve on this board and bring that perspective to you. I use data, I use evidence, I do research all of my things. If you ever see me at a meeting, you will see that I have tons of Post-it notes on my agenda because I am ready for the work. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all candidates and to invite the audience to join me in a warm round of applause in appreciation for those participating this evening. Thank you. I especially want to thank our audience this evening for your attention and your participation with your audience questions that really have helped to make this an excellent community event. In closing, League members and candidates remind you that voter information and candidate materials are available to view outside the chamber and on the candidates' websites. Also, this forum has been recorded and can be viewed on both the League of Women Voters Davis Area website and the Davis Media Access website through Election Day. Before departing, please remember to complete and return our brief evaluation survey that we have provided. Your feedback is essential to ensure these free, nonpartisan league forums best meet our community's voter education needs. Again, thank you to my fellow league members for facilitating tonight's forum and to Davis Media Access for their forum co-sponsorship. This concludes our Trustee Area 2 Candidate Forum. On behalf of all of us at the League of Women Voters, thank you for attending. Travel home safely and have a good evening.